Hello and welcome to Wellbeing in Action. I'm Daniela Cooper and I'm sitting here with Steve Cooper today to talk about Wellbeing in Action. I would like to invite you to take part of this conversation with us. So today we're going to be looking into me as my self-critic. So I would like you today to invest some time in being your own critic, self-reflective, and try and work with us into developing a well-being, a balanced view in action. Today, and as we have for the last episode and the next two after this one, we're going to be using and springboarding some ideas about rules using the work of Jordan Peterson and 12 Rules for Life. These are his rules. We are applying some of these ideas into our own conversation and see how can that be something that you would like to maybe base some conversation or reflection into your life. On these episodes today, Be Your Own Critic, we are looking into how we can better ourselves by looking into reflectively into ourselves, how this self-reflection can bring us into develop ideas, new principles around our life so we can bring some balance. Steve, welcome. Would you like to talk a little bit about yourself and introduce you for those that are starting to watch this show today?
Sure. Well, as you can tell from my name, we're married. Married 25 years coming up this year. And both Danny and I have worked a combined number of 40 years together in education. And of course, part of education is about being very, very reflective. We have to be reflective practitioners all the time. This can be reflective annually, termly, and also lesson by lesson, but also moment by moment, because as we were taking lessons in, we would have 30 pairs of eyes in front of us, and sometimes it would be so fixed that we know we've got you, and we're moving, and sometimes they would be like deers caught in the headlights, and we're looking at it going, I've lost you here. So we need to do that instant self-reflection to bring it back. But of course, you're talking on your channel about well-being and being balanced and imbalanced, and how self-reflection can help you to bring back balance into your life.
Yes, we are doing the same show in Portuguese as well. We are based in Brazil, and I would like to thank Canal de Piracicaba. Muito obrigada pela oportunidade da gente estar trazendo esse episódio também em inglês. So the Wellbeing in Action is also now being provided in English, and we're hoping to be talking and engaging in conversations with a large number of all of you that can around the world just be listening and talking to us in our reflections after this show. And the idea about being self-reflective is one that, as Steve said, help us to actually look into the responses that we give to a situation in our life and see how we can best approach this, or how we can differently approach this and move us towards a goal. And the goal here is the well-being. The well-being meaning balancing. Interestingly, Steve, because I was talking today to Kev, we were talking about with a friend and a family member as well, and we were looking at this idea of well-being. And when we think about balance, we think, okay, there's an equilibrium here. But interestingly, that the equilibrium can be met at different energy levels. So, if I think about the chemistry and the Chatelier principle, which is this about the equilibrium, we can actually bring this into a higher energy level. So even though we think about a well-being, we're not thinking about something that is established as this is it and I've achieved that and this is it, because the equilibrium is actually fluid.
Absolutely, because you need to also think about balance, but also being in balance. So a very simple expression is read the room.
Yeah.
Because if you bring, really silly example, if you bring high energy to a funeral, you haven't read the room. You need to be in balance. And you're absolutely right. Yeah. I used to teach this when I did A-level religious philosophy. And we would talk about your alpha waves in your brain. You know more about this than I do from your study. Tell us about alpha waves and beta waves and things.
Yeah, they will be different energy patterns that we will at some point be able to meet, and being in different wavelengths means that we are allowing ourselves to encounter a different energy level, and therefore be at more restful or be at more creative point. So
one of the things about experiencing, and when we were talking, this is religious philosophy, so bear with me on this. A religious experience is actually, you can map the alpha wave changes in someone's brain, and what we equated that to was, for example, going to a football match or going to a concert, where your energy level is already heightened. So at a football match or a concert, you're going to be shouting and waving up and down and doing things that actually, if you were doing that at a bus stop, people would think that you were crazy and should be locked up. But it's not. You're just being imbalanced with the situation. Our daughter, if you remember, Julia, she did not want to go to a concert to see Jamiroquai.
Yeah.
Our son, James, did. The three of us had a wonderful time. And everybody else at the O2 Arena in London had a fantastic time. Julia sat there looking at her phone. So it didn't matter about the energy level. She was totally out of balance with it. What did you think of it? Hated it.
Yeah.
Everyone else loved it. Yeah. And I would bring this up as well and say, well, think about what we do and how we interact with individuals. And the way that we do that, if we're in balance, though, if we did that with a total stranger, we would be in court. So you're absolutely right. It's finding out what the things that we're talking about, bringing that balance, but also being in balance with what is happening around you, which is also a very important part of well-being.
For that, I would like just to bring you into do a very self-reflective and understand. And there is a sentence that I use in Portuguese that might help us to understand. I don't know if I'll translate this very well, so I would like your help with it, which is, if something bothers you, don't leave it as it is, just do something when you're bothered about something, and that the idea of that is that sometimes could be as simple as I put a glass in front of you and you're not really quite, you're a bit bothered by the position of the glass. It will fall, or you think you might hit it, and it's just by placing it elsewhere that equilibrium is back. But it's not accepting that the environment should impose that into you, and it's also
we notice that a lot with people with autism. There could be something that really bothers them. No one else would notice this. Some, for example, would be the texture. Some would be just a movement, a sound, a noise, and that would bother them, and then it would put them out of balance with their environment, with their own emotions as well. And these things, it's very interesting when we talk about bullying. And bullying is not just a thing, a school thing. It actually happens in business. So in the business environment, you can be bullied. And one of the terrible things about bullying is that it's the insipidness of it. Is someone will just do a very slight thing, and it's constant. It's that drip effect that actually, when you look at the Grand Canyon, drip over millions of years causes the Grand Canyon. And one of the important things, like you say, something bothering you, it may seem so very, very small, but it's not, because it builds up. One of the really important things that I love about your work and all the things that you are doing is that it's almost like you're doing the fine tweaks and tunings. It's like servicing your car to avoid the engine blowing up, to avoid the gearbox seizing on you. And I send you out all these congratulations, Dani, because actually you're doing such a worthwhile thing in your job and your mentoring and talking about well-being. And this is the thing about mental health, is it has such a bad stigma. If you say you need help, you're already stigmatizing. It's something like 86% of people in America, where they really do have psychologists and therapists, but 86% of people who were surveyed still thinks it's a sign of weakness.
Yeah, it's the interesting thing about the tuning is that you put it in a way that is very interesting and reminded me of looking at a microscope and having, used
your
so many microscopes and my science brain,
exactly.
And have used it in our classrooms and everything. But we have that fine adjustment and the coarse adjustment. And I remember thinking, sometimes it's so easy to say, oh, well, you need to change your job. And this is where sometimes the therapy helps you to have this big mindset changes, or this big event in your life changes. And then how do I make that persist? How do I make that happen every single day? How do I stick with it?
But it just doesn't have to be the big events either, because if you have a good HR in your company, and it could be such a small thing that's bothering you, someone who is a trusted colleague, a trusted friend, someone with whom you can speak to and raise these issues before they turn into
a big
into something.
And this is where I think I see my job, because and I actually won't say this just as a job, but this is where I see that I can help. And I often say that I am a facilitator to that conversation that you have with yourself, because that's the first line of conversation that has to work in order for this one to happen. And what will I bring to the HR in my company if I don't know exactly what bothers me? I know that when I come to work, as an example, and I see that in company, I know that I'm bothered that I have to sit here. But is it because the person next to me is loud? Is it because I'm directly to light from the streets that I don't like? Is it because I was made to sit here and I don't want to? So,
or someone has said something and it hasn't sat well with you, and then it's festering. You don't swallow it like you're just swallowing it down like Kool-Aid. You fester it, think about it, and this is what the self-criticism actually about, because it's almost like a misnomer. Self-criticism means what? I need to sit there and beat myself up about this and attack myself and what I've done wrong. No, it's actually, there's a difference between criticism, being critical and critically appreciating something, and actually giving something feedback. Now, you know this in Portuguese, that these three terms, they all translate into the same word.
Yes, and it could be the same word, but it isn't the same thing. So often I say, let's develop critical thinking instead of being critical of the thinker or the process in the middle. I would like, Steve, if we can actually focus on an example, and today I think it fits really well. So when we're talking about, again, being self-reflective, what could be ways in doing it? And actually I'm asking a question that I will answer, and then I will ask your help throughout today and this conversation that we have. We can use that to show people how to be or one way of being self-reflective. But in England and in the schools in England, we use very often WWWEBI. For those that not sure about this, is what went well and even better if. But I actually developed that into 3 questions, and I use a little bit of the idea of positive psychology, where I can only develop my weaknesses moving from my strengths. And you would be actually quite surprised of how many people I ask to list 3 strengths and they can't.
Yes.
They find very difficult. And this is being self-critical. I need to know what I do really well, because it's by knowing what I do well that I can build on the weaknesses that I might have or that I would like to develop. So,
and importantly on this is something that I used to say is that anyone can point out the problems.
Yeah.
Find the solution. Those are the intelligent people. And this is where the self-reflection means, okay, this is what's happening to me. This is what I think should be happening to me. And these are the solutions to which. And now this is positive balance that you can bring. And it doesn't matter whether it's home, whether it's a social marital life, whether it's with friends, whether it's with your own children, because my goodness, they can drive you crazy at time, or with your work colleagues.
And then I'll put it back. Do they drive you crazy, or you are driven crazy by them?
Well, little bit of both. Because yes, I do remember being a child myself, and once you sussed out how to push the buttons, yes, you can push those buttons.
Not allowing yourself to get into that state of mind is so important, but I'll leave that for another time, for another conversation. And here I would like to bring these 3 questions that I use. And actually, I'm just sharing with you if you would like to also be using that as a way to start your self-reflective activities. And the first one is, what am I doing well, and I'll keep doing every day of this week? So what am I doing? So think about a diet. You wanted to change your diet and your lifestyle, and you wanted to think about being healthier with your choices. So one of the ways that, what am I doing well for my goal of being healthy, and I would like to keep it? Oh yeah, I will keep eating my vegetables, I'll keep eating my fruits. So what am I doing well, and I'll keep doing? What am I not doing, which I'll introduce today? So yesterday I wasn't actually eating vegetables in every meal. I will start adding that. So what am I not doing that I will start doing? And what I am doing that I should stop doing? And within these 3 questions, so much can be done. And as Steve pointed out right at the beginning, our teaching career was very much self-reflective, and we learned to reflect on long periods of time and very short periods of time. And sometimes in 10 minutes of a lesson, we need to know what is working right now that I'll keep doing, what I'll have to stop right now, and what I need to introduce next. And if you start doing that in sometimes small chunks of your day, and then passing that into bigger chunks of your day, or vice versa, we start with the bigger chunks of your day and start then doing it into smaller, I'm pretty sure that will be very fulfilling or self-fulfilling. Right. To guide us into this conversation today, we are looking into the 3 next set of rules that Jordan Peterson brought into his life. So we're basing as a springboarding the 12 rules for life from Jordan Peterson. And today we're going to the 4th, 5th, and 6th rule, and we are talking here about rule number 4. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. Rule number 5, do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. And rule number 6, set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. Although they can merge today, as my self-critic, I will ask us to just talk around the idea of compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today? What brings to mind, Steve?
Well, what brings to mind is going on holiday. And the reason I say this is that when you go on holiday, the first thing that I like to do is work out what is the end goal. What is the purpose? Where's the objective? Where are we going with this? So, for example, let's say I want to go to Rome. Well, that's the end. And I want to go to Rome and I want to see the Colosseum. That's the end. That's the purpose. That's the objective. That's what we're doing. Now I can work all the way backwards to work out what are the stages that I need to do to ensure I make that happen. Mm-hmm. And the reason you do that is because doing it the other way round will be like, we're going on holiday. Where are we going? Don't know. Getting in the car, we're driving, and we're going to go and see, well, have I got the inoculations? Do I need a visa? Is the aeroplane available? Have I got the money? Does it go? It's all backwards. And you're going to cause yourself a heck of a lot of trouble. And in fact, if I were to say to someone, we're going on, I don't know, I'm just going to drive to the airport and see what happened, they would look at you as if you'd lost your mind, because we plan it backwards. Now, the thing is, in our own lives, how many of us plan an end goal objective before we set out? We can say, people get together in a relationship. Right, what do you want out of this? Don't know, let's see what we do as we make up as we go along. Okay, and then without being critical of anyone, 10 years, 20 years, it's broken down, it's gone, it's moved away. If someone just said, I don't know, I just want a house. Mm-hmm. But why? Where is this house? How big is it? Does it suit your needs? Have that thing in mind. So when we're being self-critical, I honestly believe that we cannot be self-critical if we haven't established what the goal is. You mentioned for yourself eating well. Well, eating more vegetables, eating this, eating whatever. Unless I set up my goals, unless I know myself, unless I know what my body type, and I know you're going to be talking this in future weeks, yes, and I won't go into it too much. How can you say what vegetables? How are you eating it? To say, a real simple example, I'm going to eat more vegetables. Brilliant. But if you just take and say, well, I'm going to eat more potatoes and boil them to death, yeah, how do you know that that's doing you any good?
I think I will just bring your whole thinking back, because I don't disagree with it, but just to the fact that how does that apply to this rule, which is you have to know yourself to compare yourself to yourself. So you have to know what is your end goal to know how to plan together, and not someone else's end goal.
Exactly. So when you're talking about don't worry about it. Now, in our old professional life in teaching, we moved away from generic scores that a year group needed to obtain to individualized, personalized goals, which were based on what the kid has scored in primary school. Yeah. So then within a class, you could have students ranging for a target 4 to a target 8. And so a student sitting at one table would have their target of which they needed to achieve for that lesson. Yeah. Sitting next to them is another student, and they had their target, what they needed, and we would say to them, but they got this and I only got that. Yeah. And say, well, actually, if you think about a personal thing, it's very simple numbers. If your target is 6 and you score a 5, and my target is a 4, but I score a 5, we both scored 5. Yeah. Who did better? But it's the one whose target was, because they got a grade above, the one who was a 6. So if you're comparing with each other, you're thinking, well, we just did the same. Yeah. No, you didn't. So you need to have your end goal and your end product to know where you're comparing this to.
it's very interesting, and it comes so many things to mind, and I do not want to kind of go into too much detail and lose some of you that are following with us. But what I would like to make it clear is that I can't compare an end goal, even if I'm talking about health or being healthy, compared to someone else, and then it's just a simple thing, and in our daily lives, me in the line of work I'm doing at the moment, we'll have someone that is allergic to milk or to protein, the milk protein, or dairy, and in that sense I can't have a diet that it has got dairy, and it's not healthy for that person, but it will be healthy for someone else. And also when we set percentage of fat, and this is just so different from one person to another. When we have two different children, and sometimes we apply the same end goal. Let's remember that we're not really foolish talking here about happiness as the end goal, because again, in itself, that is a massive a massive philosophical argument here that we're not going to get into.
Yeah, really simple things. People compare. I'm going to compare. When our son James was born, there was somebody we knew who was so competitive. Their son was the same few months as James, and they just wanted to almost say, my kid is graduating from university already, they're doing it, and you just feel this pressure. Why am I comparing? James is doing what he's doing, and he's strong and he's healthy and he's doing everything that he should do at the right stage for James. There was no worries about it. Motor cars, I got this car sitting on my drive, you've got that car sitting on my drive. Well, my objective in owning that and my reasons are mine, they're not yours. You've got yours. I'm so happy that you got, if it fits your needs and your objective, that's brilliant. And I want to know, what I really want to know is why you chose that. Why did you? Because that's interesting to me. It doesn't mean to say that I'm going to change anything about because I've got my own things and my own objectives of what I'm doing. One of the interesting things was I got very ill. Back in 2017, I was diagnosed with a tumor in my head, and we found out I needed a very, very large operation for this, and it was going to be quite stressful on my body to recover and all of this. So one of the things that we decided together and that I would do is to join a gym. And I hate gyms. I always hated it. It's so boring. It's not going to happen. Classic story of, start a membership and then within a month you've given up, and 6 months later you've paid all these memberships. That was me. So one of the things that I was able to do was go in and find my own goals and targets. We were very lucky and very fortunate that the equipment in the gym was super modern. And I could find my own way into it. And I mean that. I found my own way, not what anybody else was doing. So I had my own targets for the day. And then one of the things that actually happened was I got myself one of these. And the reason that I could do it was I could set my own targets and see my own progress against myself, not what anyone else was doing. There was another thing that the gym came with an app, and it had all of the members in there, and out of membership position, I was something like 5,000. And my body muscle strength was, I had the muscle strength of a 72-year-old man.
Indeed.
And what I could do was daily and weekly, I could work on it myself, and I could see my body age coming down. And those were my targets. I could compare myself from what I was yesterday to where I was today to where I wanted to be and I was doing it for myself, not by anyone else in there.
And this is in businesses and in industry, in companies. This is where setting a self-development strategy for each individual employee is very important. And also have a common goal, because don't remember, we are a team and we will work and in that shared accountability. The good, well, the best performance I have, so will have an impact on the team, on those that I'm working. So I'm as strong as the weakest link, but also we will encourage people to be their best. And I use that often, and I say your best today is your best today, and you can compare yourself to only yesterday. But yesterday I felt a little bit better. Today I'm a bit tired, and this is it. I can move away. And also, interestingly, if we can do 1% better, and if you continuously encourage yourself to do this 1% better, it could be that at the end of the month you're doing 30% better than you are when you started, even if it's 20% better than you are when you started.
I think there's also a very good benefit in maintaining as well. Yeah. Because if you compare yourself with yesterday, and if I can do the same again today and the same again today, you know, the expression in our gym said, little by little, a little becomes a lot. See you again tomorrow. Now, one of the things that has happened in my health is that I've had to come to a new realization of where I am. That as I was yesterday, I will not be today. I will never be today. It's even got to the point where now the impact of this has got so much that I've lost my driving license, which is one of the things that breaks my heart, because I love driving and things. But what am I going to do? Because if I sit and compare myself with how I was yesterday and say I need to improve on that, I can't improve on that. I need to find a new way. And so, you know, even in my health regime, although I try to, one of the things that keeps me happy is that if I keep and I maintain, because keeping and maintaining is getting there, and that is also a very healthy, because remember we talk about balance and excess.
Yes, and sustaining the balance and the equilibrium. Is that what we said, isn't it? To get to that equilibrium, you might have to have overcome something, but just to sustain it. I return to my facts, scientific facts, and I say that in physics we have to accelerate to get to a equilibrium when the forces are balanced, and even that I have to have accelerated, but sustaining that is still an effort, Steve.
Using that analogy, a plane can't keep accelerating or else it will go to space.
Exactly.
So it needs to reach and then maintain.
And within that is that 1% better is sometimes not, is in the effort but not in the result. Does that make sense? That I am putting a 1% better effort to still sustain the same result?
Yes, sometimes I need to put an effort in, because it is an effort when the tinnitus that I have in my head 24/7 is screaming, when my body hurts, I haven't slept, and then I have to find that mental endurance to actually do exactly what I did again the day before. You know, people who know me will know that in April I tore the meniscus in my knee. Again, it was a mix between what's happening in my head, losing balance, being up too early, going out and losing the balance, and literally losing the balance. And I tripped over one of the dogs. And that set me back, because now it sparked off other issues. And where I was before walking 15 kilometers a day, I'm down to 3 or 4. And it can be so frustrating when you compare yourself with with that. But you got to have that goal and you got to have that target, because if you don't have that, you cannot self-assess, you cannot self-criticize, because you don't know what you're criticizing against. You know, one of the interesting things that I like is if we're watching a movie, I want to know all about that movie, simply because I'm watching something with my own eyes and my own interpretation. But what was that person trying to achieve in that moment? And you can watch these things on YouTube and say, "Oh, did you know that in there there's this secret?" And actually, that's you go, now I get it. Now I understand what you're trying to do. So it's having that deeper understanding and knowing what you're actually comparing yourself with. I use this expression, which is when you do this auto-reflection, it's like playing a game of squash. You need that solid brick wall of a standard to know what you're bouncing against. So you get that back. Because if you take that away, all you're doing is whacking a ball and it's flying away. It's not coming back. So you're doing no self-reflection at all.
Boundaries, protocols, rules, culture, values, vision, that's all that can work as that wall.
And this is what we're doing as well with Peterson. Is we're using these as a wall, as a structure, to say, okay, this is what this guy has come up with an idea. And I've said before, this could be this, it could be 10 commandments, it could be atheistic 10 commandments. But if you don't have a standard of which you're comparing, of which you're reflecting on, of which you're balancing your well-being on, you don't know. How do you know? Like the holiday where I started, if you don't have an objective, a destination, how do you know when you've achieved and you've arrived?
There's so much around that, and I will just bring us back to the beginning of this conversation. And if you're joining us now, we are talking and having an open discussion about well-being and how to put well-being into action. I'm speaking to Steve. My name is Dani. Steve is my husband, and we are here in Brazil, and we are doing this through Canal de Piracicaba. So thank you very much again for this opportunity. We're using springboarding ideas from the rules from Jordan Peterson, the 12 rules for life, for his life. And we just covered, do not let your children, compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to someone else is today. And we are going to move into the rule number 5. And this one between us is a little bit of actually controversial. And it would be very nice to know what you think of it. And remember, we are here as a self-critical, and how we can use that to, in some ways, to help us to access and to evaluate what we want, and how we can compose maybe a few sets of rules or principles for ourselves. And his rule, Jordan Peterson's rule, is number 5, is do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. Also interesting, because we are only using this statement. In the book, he will really discuss and expand and bring a huge amount of text and I forgot how you say it.
It's still only his examples and ideas. Of course.
And how does that apply to you?
It doesn't. It really doesn't. Our good friend Cameron said it succinctly. It's a kid's rule to embarrass their parents. It's a job. It's what they need to do. Now listen. What are we talking about here? There is something that Jordan Peterson actually puts his finger on, and I will get to it.
Okay.
But the first thing to say is this. I was thinking about this recently because my own grandparents fought in World War II.
Yep.
One was in London working as a emergency ambulance driver, and the other one was in the Navy working on the minesweeper boat. And this granddad Cooper, who was working on the minesweeper boats, he told this wonderful story. And that generation, by the way, growing up, and we had them as our grandparents, we had them as our primary school teachers. I was taught in primary school by someone who 30 years previously was in the fields of Europe shooting and killing people, and now he's teaching us in primary school. Bizarre. But these guys wouldn't talk about it. My grandfather never talked about his experience, but one time when the BBC was realizing that his generation was dying out and saying, we're losing these stories, first-hand stories of the people who were there. And my grandfather wrote his story, and I got to read it that way round, actually on the site of the BBC. And he told this wonderful story about cleaning out the mines before an attack on an island in an estuary in Holland, I think it was. And the Germans had their gun positions centered on either side of the river and in the estuary. So basically, any boat entering was in a kill zone. Now, the Allies were coming in to do an attack, and as he pointed out, they always went in the day before to sweep out the mines that are floating in the sea. And as he said it, and as I remember it probably badly, they were being shot to pieces. And one of the things about minesweeper boats is that they were made out of wood and not metal, because the mines were magnetic. So they not only were weak, but my goodness, if they were hit by a mine, they just exploded into shrapnel and pieces. And he said his captain radioed back to HQ in England and saying, look, we're coming under a lot of heavy fire. What should we do? And the return was, keep going. So they kept going. They're getting under, and boats are exploding. They talk about bodies floating in the sea, and people. These boats would travel like this, so that if one get exploded, the next one would come in, and so they're seeing their colleagues on other boats just being destroyed and killed. And there's my grandfather on his boat just watching, and they radio back, we're getting torn to pieces here. What should we do? Keep going. And they had to keep going. Again, it got really, really dangerous. The third time, I believe it was, they said, what? It's really dangerous. We're getting killed. We're getting picked off here. What do we do? And they told him in very brutal language to keep going. What did they expect? There's a war on. Now, if we think about these kind of states of mind, and those are the stories and the experience that our grandparents went through, you would have thought that the next generation would be ever so grateful for the actions of what their parents did, but they weren't. Because this is, when you look at the rock and roll of the 60s, and you've got that generation, you've got the Who writing, people try to put me down, talking about my generation, hope I die before it get old. You know, these are people who are absolutely rejecting what their parents have done. Now, Roger Daltrey is now the age of my parents, and this is the generation who are looking down at the youth and saying, this is terrible, what are you doing, you're embarrassing me. No, you were the guys on Brighton Beach, on Hastings Beach, mods and rockers, kicking the living daylights out of each other, which is, you know, look at the film Quadrophenia. This is what you were doing when you were young. So just because these guys are doing and you feel embarrassed about it now, what are you talking about? This is craziness. And the other thing that is it's up to the kids to push boundaries, to find new ways. Because what am I saying? You know, think the great artists, musicians. Oh, son, you're embarrassing me. Look at you. You're done. No, you're being you, and you're being yourself. And so, actually, in our role, it is not about feeling embarrassed. It's actually about understanding and helping them to find their balance and their way through it.
So that's the language that is used in this rule, Peterson rules, that led you to think that it's not the children, the embarrassment or the disliking of the parents and the children that becomes a problem. Is more to do what the responsibility that there is as a parent.
Or your perceived or your imposed responsibility, because we were talking with someone very recently and they were trying to impose upon their son, who is 15, 16 and moving very soon towards a university career, and they were very aggressive at imposing what they think their son was doing and ignoring what their son was actually saying. We had this in our own situation that I personally had to deal with, and it was tough because our son wanted to have a military career.
Yeah.
And I am very I'm not anti military. It's one of these necessary evils, but the thought of my son picking up a weapon and destroying someone else's life just didn't sit well with me. But it was his choice, and we had to work through it, and we didn't discourage him.
And where do we actually look at this rule and think, no, that's a point where you should not behave this way, and that's according to not my own principle as a father, as a parent, as a mother, but as a human being, that's just not acceptable.
Well, now we look at deferred responsibility, because we met this a lot in school life, for example, where nothing was our fault. It was always someone else's fault, and someone else needs to solution this. So, a simple example, schools. Schools are there to provide an education, but actually talk about triangulation in schooling.
Yeah, which is what we're looking to when you're looking at any standard or whatever progress that you're assessing, and we always say triangulate that, and or even if I'm setting up as a standard procedure within the school, triangulate it to know, is that what the children perceive, is that what the parents are perceiving, is that what the school is what or you triangulate it, putting the classroom teacher and the leadership and the work in the books of the children. So however it is, and I think if we think about this well-being as a child, and we triangulate that, we will always think about the community that child is in.
I would say about our own well-being, because rather than deferring responsibility, look at your own responsibility. A simple one: health. Doctors are human beings, and the human body is extremely complicated, and every day you can read about these awful cases of misdiagnosed. The doctor said, I just had a cough, it turned out my leg was going to blow off. I don't know what it is. We take these extreme, not to get personal on anyone. But where is our own responsibility in this? Before my diagnosis, we know I was getting headaches for 5 years, and I went deaf. I went deaf for a year, and you kept telling me, go see the doctor, go see the doctor. Oh, I don't need, it's just something, I don't know. Suddenly we found out it was grave. It was a big issue. Yeah. So where was my responsibility in this? And then to go and defer the whole solutions, because, solution was to remove the tumor, but removing the tumor meant I've lost my hearing, I've lost my balance, I've lost my sleep, I've lost my whatever. And what am I going to do? Am I going to now look at the doctors and put all of that blame onto them, which actually will upset me and cause me imbalance and not have the well-being? Or do I look at myself and think about what is my own reactions and responsibility? Now, in that sense, in what Peterson is saying, I get, because if you leave the education of the child and say that's the teacher's job, the health of your child, that's the doctor's job, the policing of your child, that's the police's job. Well, what's your job in this? Where do you see this? There is something of your own responsibility in this. Now, taking this, it's not only just of your child, you can also be with a group of friends. Because if you're with a group of friends and one of this group is behaving irresponsibly, whereas if you say, well, it's not me, it's them, they're just going to, but you're associated with them. I always think about this in sort of group mentality, you know. If you're wearing a team shirt, we used to say this to students. You're going out on a trip, you're wearing the school uniform, you are an ambassador of the school. The way that you behave will reflect on us. So do your best. I think in terms of that, I can sort of go along with Peterson, as in, right, you see something that sits unwell, you do something about it.
I think that's the point that we both very comfortably agree on, and then not only ourselves but with Peterson rules. And this rule in particular, I look at the fact that if you can see that the behavior that the child is demonstrating is not sitting well with you.
But it doesn't have to be the child. It can be your friend.
Yes,
it can be your work colleague.
But
it could be someone in your group.
But it has to start somewhere. And the first thing is it's always with ourselves.
Yes.
So this is why it's so important. When I was training teachers, and I did that very often, from the start, when I was introduced as a mentor, I used to say, I don't want the answer from you, but I want you to think, what kind of teacher do you want to be? Because I know who I am as a teacher, and you don't have to be an example of a version of me. You have to be your own person, and you're going to have a whole year to train and to sit in different classrooms and to observe different teachers. What kind of teacher do you want to be? And as a parent, that is quite interesting. What kind of parent do we want to be?
Well,
it's not a question, by the way. It's just
no. To make it more broad, for an example, I knew someone, and this person didn't service their car. In their words, car servicing was just a way for the manufacturer to make money. Okay. 3 years of owning this car, the car blew smoke. It wasn't functioning. They took it to the manufacturer to be checked, and they said, well, the engine's gone. Why? They hadn't changed the oil. Now, this person took on no personal responsibility in that. Yeah. What they did was they blamed the car, the manufacturer, the system, the this, the that, the that, the that, the that. And looking at this in sort of balance and well-being, this person was then driving themselves crazy because all they wanted to do was to complain to anybody and everyone that they could imagine about how unlucky they'd been, how they'd been robbed, how this manufacturer had ripped them off, and they were not taking on board any personal responsibility of their own actions within this situation. Yeah,
in neuroscience they call it, and I'm translating from Portuguese into English, which is third suffering, which when you suffer way beyond what is necessary, because like you said it before, you put yourself in that victim position, and everything happens to me, you know, it's all a disaster, nothing is good, when there are a lot that can be avoided by simply taking the responsibility.
And I think in terms of well-being and balance, if we understand that we are not a uniform group. We may be sharing a certain address. We may be sharing a workplace. We may be sharing an experience in a restaurant. But that doesn't mean that we've all suddenly become one faceless block. We still be individuals in there. And the behavior of one is going to reflect on the rest, including ourselves. Now, when we have self-awareness and we understand what our wall is, where our boundaries are, what we like, what we dislike, we can then look at the behaviors of the others in the group. And if we're not comfortable on it, I think the first question has got to be is, why am I not comfortable with this? Not what are you doing? Is why don't I like this? Now, let's say you go back to a child and the child is wanting to speak. They may say something which is racist, sexist, immature, and rather than saying, don't do that and who do you think you are, have the conversation. Where did you hear that? Why are you speaking like that? What's going on?
It's fine as long as we are understanding the complex and chronological and psychic development of that child, because as you said yourself, we can't rationalize with the irrational, and there is a respect on the fact that maybe you're not able to do that to a 2-year-old, and sometimes you have to just in that moment be able to say not acceptable.
But then when somebody comes up and says, I want to make it in the movie industry, and you go, oh, you can't do that, and then, well, there's no such thing as you can't do that, because all you need to do is look on Netflix and see there's thousands of people who actually can do that. But then to have the proper conversation with the goals, with the boundaries, with the ideas about what do you mean? How do we work this? Is this real? Is this it doesn't embarrass. It doesn't embarrass me. It actually builds me. It makes me better because I can have that conversation with that person. But then on the other hand, it's a strong thing to do is to make those personal choices that when someone within a group, it could be a friendship group, it can be a family group, and they are behaving in such a way, it may even be a life marriage partner who is behaving in such an obnoxious way that is causing you to be unbalanced because you know yourself and you know this isn't the way that you wish to behave. Now you can have a stronger conversation, and the conversation then has to be with more professional people is this is happening, I don't like it, something needs to happen, something radical. And I think, again, if we go back to Peterson, if we go back to well-being, if we're going back to knowing yourself and being your own self-critic, knowing that strength and having that strength to say, this is where I'm at, this is where you're at, we're not there anymore.
And it brings me, Steve, to the fact that self-reflection is not self-pleasing, is not actually reflect on something. How do I make myself happier? And again, I'm only bringing happiness.
Or how do I learn to accept something which I find unacceptable?
That's it. Building resilience. The idea of self-reflection is having, in some ways, like we started with a clear goal, with the well-being, being actually at front of it, or like I often bring it to my clients, that a lot of people that come to us and say, I would like to lose some weight. And I think, well, lose weight can be not necessarily the end goal, but the consequence of being healthy or having your well-being taken care of, because that way you ended up slimming down or losing the extra weight.
Taking it again, you would never say someone who has an absolute peanut allergy, a lethal one, say, don't worry about it, all you need to do is just try a few in it. No, you if you know yourself, you know where to draw these draw these lines. And if you know yourself, you also can say, well, if I am feeling embarrassed about this, but I'm feeling embarrassed, but no one else is, these are things that I need to work on with myself, rather than pointing the finger at someone else.
And if you're joining us now, we are on the second episode of Wellbeing in Action. We're having a conversation here, and we're bringing within our discussions, I hope, that ideas that you can incorporate in your own life on how to establish well-being, how to put your well-being into action. And we're thinking and we're talking about equilibrium, balance. We're talking about you today as your inner self-critic. How can you look at what is happening in your own life, and how can you look into how you sustain that level of well-being for a period of life? Sometimes we need to bring in changes. And we are focusing, or we are actually using and springboarding the ideas from Jordan Peterson, 12 Rules for Life, for his life. We've covered today Rule 5, Rule 6, actually Rule 4, Rule 5, and Rule 6 that we're going to do just now. Set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. There's things about this I personally like very much. So before asking your own idea about it.
Well, I challenge you on that word perfect.
I actually challenge that as well, because I don't like the word perfect. I like to work with excellence, and you know that. So in fact, I often get it wrong. I get that wrong in excellency. But the idea is that if we are excellent, if we're looking at doing our best, the perfection itself is very temporary, and perfection, I think, is we work towards the image of the perfect. So in a way, we're not looking at our idealistic view of perfection, but we're looking at being our best. How do you see that in set your house in order before you criticize the world?
This, of course, is a very old concept, a really old. Judge not, yet you be judged, this kind of thing, you know, commenting on the speck in someone's eyes and you've got a plank in front of your face. It's a very old concept, but let's see. As we grow and as we become more settled with ourselves, the more accepting we should be becoming and behaving. What does that mean? We make mistakes and we own up to mistakes. We teach our own son. It's not what you've done, it's your attitude towards it. Tell me what you've done. Don't make up a story. Don't make up an excuse. Don't blame it. Don't scapegoat. Own it. That's a hard thing to do, because we know with kids, they can be sitting there with chocolate all over their face. Have you eaten the cake? No. Well, you got chocolate on your face? No, I don't. And it's that type of narcissism where the narcissist never grows up. It's always someone else's fault. It's always scapegoating. There's never any self-reflection, because for the narcissist, any type of self-reflection is a point of weakness, and I can't be weak. So one way I will cover up my weakness is to attack. And I'll attack by putting you down, gaslighting you, being abusive, either financially, physically, verbally, emotionally. And in this sense of a person with a disorder, it is very difficult for them to set their house in order, because their house has got to be perfect, and you're not allowed to look, and you're not allowed to question. We don't have to look too far to what's happening in the political stage to see these types of things in action. But actually, as we grow into a more independent life and a more, let's say, selfish life that was less village community-based to more individualized, especially since the late 70s into the more capitalistic 90s and on into the new millennium. These types of attitudes and behavior are coming more to the front. Not my fault. Look at them, but look at what they're doing. Look at them and look. Okay. Moving into a healthy, what we talk about self-reflection, this is not an open opportunity for you again to beat yourself up. Yeah. You are allowed. We were just talking about things that people do that upset us. Would they genuinely upset us? And I'm not going to put my house in order first before I start work. I haven't got time for this. It's almost something that's intertwined and interlude, that we will reflect, we will look at ourselves, and we will, you're doing this and I don't like it. Well, I'm going to look at myself and understand this. And I can also put my house in order, but I'm also allowed to say, yeah, I did, and I still don't like what you're doing.
I like to think about linking to the others and the idea of taking responsibility. And now I'm going to bring it to something which is quite ordinary when I think about our daily lives and what we do. And often, because I work with the healthy environment and nutrition, I will have people that will say, well, I can't really have that diet or follow that diet because my husband or my wife will bring something and will bring a pizza and then we have to eat it. I say, well, you don't have. You have a choice. And that's the idea. We have a choice, and we can make this choice based in bringing what you said into an objective, my well-being, and I can make that choice. And I can actually do that based on my own perspective of the self-critical, the awareness of my well-being first, before I start criticizing the others. So I often tell people, let's model it first. Let's do it. So when we were in schools and the teaching, we used to say that let's not have double standards here. Let's make sure that we are showing the kids the best behavior so they can follow. And our children were the ones that used to do that.
One of the things is, in the issue of mobile phones in schools. So the first thing was the teachers weren't allowed to walk around with them. Yes. But bringing it also back to a more business thing, because in a good company, you will have an annual review. Yes. And in this annual review, you'll have your 3 targets. The 3 targets can be global, as in the whole business, target number 1. Target number 2, departmental, and target number 3, personal. And the way that your performance was judged was on your performance, not what that person was doing. And you have to sit there and justify it and look at yourself first. Now, one of the things is a shared responsibility. And as a department head and department lead, I had targets of attainment for the department needed to be shared with the team, and therefore I needed to also take on the responsibility of ensuring that they were equipped to achieve the target, and also not micromanage, but we would have, as you know, bi-weekly meetings, and we would go through and check how we're doing. We're doing all right, we're doing it, what's it looking at, is it all good? And that's taking on that shared responsibility, because again, one of the reasons why managers are paid more is because they have a greater responsibility. Now, there is no point in getting to 12 months later and your line manager saying to you, you didn't meet that target, why? And then you go, well, it's their fault. Because the question will then come, well, what did you do about it? Because you need to take on that responsibility. And if you didn't do anything about it, if you didn't raise it, which brings back to the previous question, you didn't question it, if you didn't make that an issue, well, that's your fault. really is your fault. It may have been that so and so didn't pull their weight, they were late, they were not engaged, but if you didn't do anything about it, if you didn't take an active role, that's your responsibility.
And that brings to the importance again that we start this conversation about your self-reflection in shorter periods of time. So this fact that I have, of course, the clear vision, the clear goal is very important, well communicated, triangulated, like we said, when possible. So it is the goal is actually clearly shared amongst everyone that is involved in the process.
And I think this is true in families, because you can't, or you shouldn't just be a victim of flux and just go and see what happens, because you don't know with families, we sit down with a family, we talk about how was your day, where are you going, what are you doing, what's your plan, where are you going next month, what we're going to do, where would we like to be, and that makes us have a clearer vision, and we can self-reflect and start looking at ourselves of what we're doing, because one of the things with life is life just continues. So you may have a goal, and your goal, let's say we got a goal to get married. Brilliant. I've now achieved that goal. We've got married. What's next? Where are we going? Or why do we?
That's why.
So you move from one to the next to the next.
That's why the well-being is a continuum, because the well-being, it's bringing the balance between the favorable emotions and the not favorable emotions. So knowing that there will be moments of the equilibrium, the balance, and I am unhappy within a happy situation, and knowing to balance these emotions and having an adequate response is finding that.
But I also think, because we talk for I'm unhappy, I need to change, I'm happy, I need to change. No, here's another thing. You can actually be happy, and that's important. One of the real struggles of a secondary school, bringing it back to that, was a kid would join in year 7 and they couldn't connect. A year 7, an 11-year-old cannot connect what they do now to what the end result at 16 is going to be. And one of the things that I ran the department when we looked at the whole of the curriculum for the students was, you must bear in mind what their end product. So even what you do on September year 7, day 1, must have a connection and a reflect. And then what was brought into school was annual celebrations, because to work 5 years in a 16-year-old life, that's actually a third of their life, and to go with no reward until actually at the end is not good enough. And we need to do that in our personal lives, have more celebrations. I've done this today. Again, this is why I like this. You've reached your goal. Here's a celebration. It pings up yours or mine, and I send back, yay, well done.
We share with celebrations, but the looking at is one of the ways actually to establish a change permanently, a healthier, but it's looking at celebrating the little victories, and it's not being it's not promoting mediocrity here, it's not being medium about it, it's actually looking at the 3 questions that I said at the beginning, the self-reflective questions. What am I doing well that I'm continue doing? And here we go. So I'm doing this well, and I'll celebrate that and continuing applying that every single day.
Lockdown in England, and we left in the middle of lockdown when it started up again. Lockdown in England, lockdown in Brazil was tough. It was tough across the world. And we were able to find little ways of celebrating. One of the things that I did is went out and I did daily photographs. People weren't getting out. They were either not able to, they were afraid. And I would get up at 4 a.m. when there was no one. So I honestly would come into contact with nobody and go across the fields and photograph nature and sunrises and send it to people, because it was a little way of saying, I'm still here, we're still here, and we can still celebrate.
Yeah.
Because it's still going on.
And that is a lovely celebration that you continue, and it became a habit, and still now in Brazil 3 years on. And by the way, he's got a beautiful way of continue this communication with family and friends by taking daily photos and making into small videos that you actually share with everyone, that little bit. And this is your bit of wellness, the well-being that you introduced, and you continue so reflectively.
It is, because like I said before, I'm finding so many more things that I'm not able to do or have been taken away from me, and it's like, my goodness, you know, comparing myself today with yesterday, and being my own self-critic and things. But you know, so I'll look at something mundane, like a grass seed that's growing, and find a way of seeing where the sun is reflecting and shining through and changing the angle so I can get it, so I can turn a mundane object into something fantastic, you know, and I send it out. Now, here's the thing. I don't send these things out to get 250 emails back telling me what a wonderful thing I've done. I haven't done that. I send it out just to celebrate these small victories.
It's your way of celebrating it.
And sharing something that I feel is nice.
It's
on there.
Also offering the opportunity for others to celebrate that with you. And we will bring it here. Maybe there will be an appropriate time where we will talk about these struggles, because a lot of us talking about well-being is the fact that it's so important for us to find a balance after having had so many established opportunities in our life being revoked and taken away or changed due to no one's fault. That's just by simply being in this beautiful world where we just not responsible, you know. And sometimes they say you're walking down the streets and you step on dog poo and it's poop and it smells, and it does smells, and it's not to say, oh well, it's nothing, because it is something, and it will stink for everyone, for those around you, wanting or not. So I'll bring that once. I would like to bring us to a close and just say thank you for you guys if you have followed us. And this is again the second episode, Wellbeing in Action. We are based in Brazil. We are very happy to be able to share this conversation with you. I would like to thank you, Steve, for being so open and honest about so many things in your life. And
I think the final thing I want to say is, you know, if you're being your self-critic, you're also being your best friend, because it doesn't matter where you go in the world or what happens to you, you will always wake up with you and look at yourself in the mirror. So if you can do that openly and honestly, it's such a nice thing. Yeah. And honestly also means that you understand your shortcomings. Yeah. And not just be stupid to it or scapegoat or blame others, and you go, well, yeah, this is it. This is what we do. You're always talking about balance and talk about being in balance. And, you know, being your self-critic means that you are also in balance with yourself.
Yes. And it's only by having that balance that we can offer something. So I say it, and if it very fluid in the Brazilian, in the Portuguese language, when I say you can only give to others what you have. So if you have that respect for yourself, if you have that self-love, if you have that self-inner critic, you are able to do that with the same compassion, level of respect to others. So let's find it in yourself first before you offer to others. Thank you again very much.
And thank you, Dani. Great talk.
Thank you. And there will be more. So this is the second of 4, and then we're going to bring in new discussions, new things to talk about. So thank you very much. If you like it, subscribe,
comment, like.
Comment, like, and it can be either in Portuguese or in English. Muito obrigada ao Canal de Piracicaba pela oportunidade de estar aqui. Yes, go ahead, Steve. Try in your best Portuguese.
Ciao, ciao.
See you next. Thank you.